So, wholesome one, when you watch a game like you did with an eye toward an opponent, meaning you're just not watching a football game, but even when you're just watching a football game, I know that you're analyzing technique and scheme and so forth. But when you're watching thinking, okay, the Canes are playing this team and I don't know a whole lot about them, but they're playing Central Arkansas. So there's two difficult things in my mind in making that scouting report. Is it would be one thing if UAB would have been playing Pitt or Louisville or somebody with similar physical talent on the field as Miami. So you're having to judge UAB's ability versus a lesser opponent, number one. And number two, depending on Central Arkansas's style of play and their approach offensive and defensively, in terms of UAB facing an opponent that looks like Miami offensive and defensively from a scheme standpoint, that being easier to evaluate and translate what you may see last Saturday versus coming up on Thursday, if you follow me. One, from a talent standpoint, trying to make that adjustment in your mind, and also from a scheme standpoint to see, is this opponent really different than Miami, or are they running similar schemes offensive and defensively that we can see how UAB is reacting to that?
Yes, and think that's the tough part about watching games and not being able to get into like the coach film and stuff, because when you go into certain coach film, you can go back to like 2010 versus Indiana, or this offensive coordinator against this defensive coordinator who's now the DC at Louisville, and he's the head coach at Kentucky. He called this play when they played against each other back in 2006 on this down, on this hash, and he liked it against this type of scheme. So now when you watch it, when I'm watching the fan, because I call it fan, but it's actually the TV version. Okay, you don't get the all 22, number one, unless it's like a really nice replay or a big hit. So you don't always get the all 22. You get the fan view from the sideline, okay? And when you're looking at it from the sideline, you can kind of see the main thing that a lot of people's eyes go to is when the ball is snapped, they go to the QB to where the ball goes. My eyes instantly go to the O-line, D-line, because I look at how are those tackles setting? How are those guards setting? Who's the double team? Where are we sliding? Where's the running back in this play? Is this a play to set up something later on? Or is this just a basic vanilla play, get a couple yards, you can set you up with second and manageable, or third and manageable, all those type of things, okay? So that's where my mind instantly goes. If I'm scouting the defensive line for UAB, looking at it from the offensive perspective to them, my eyes instantly go one by one by one. I spend like 3 hours watching film because I'll spend about 5 to 10 minutes watching the same play. Because one play I'm going to watch, okay, this two-eye technique defensive tackle is going up against this guard who's already been kind of beaten down. But I want to see what he does when he feels comfortable. Is he flying off of that ball and he just, instead of engaging and blowing him up, does he try to swim right over and make a play in the backfield, which is what one of their interior defensive tackles does at number 44. What's my brother's name? Give me 2 seconds here. His name is Anthony Moultrie, redshirt junior, 6'4", 285 pounds. He's slender. So he's basically a DN who they made and put some weight on him, moved him into defensive tackle. He's more the finesse guy. He doesn't engage with offensive guards. He likes to swim. He likes to spin. He likes to double swipe and just get your hands off of him. So now he can play finesse game and make a play. And next to him is going to be somebody different. Number 10, and Tyree Turner, redshirt senior, 6'1", 308. He's the bigger, kind of more traditional defensive tackle who takes on the double teams. So when I'm looking and I'm scouting against the defensive line, I'm looking at who takes on double teams well, who splits them well. But you got to keep in the back of your mind, Mark, the offensive linemen at Miami are going to be a little bit different than the offensive linemen at Central Arkansas. So you have to just kind of test that back and forth as to, do I put a lot of weight into what I'm looking at against this caliber of opponent? Because that's why I don't always look at results or stats. I look at the techniques as far as what they're lining up technique and the techniques of the players. Because when you take on a double team, you're taking on a double team. It's not like, oh, I'm taking on a double team because it's Central Arkansas, so I'm going to play it this way. No, it's how your coach is teaching you to take on that double team. How your coach is, as a cornerback, how is he teaching you to play the ball? Are you playing eyes and hands, or you look, locate, and contest the ball? You know, or as a safety, are we to a point where we only play too high because we don't really trust our corners? Or do we trust our corners? We got one high up and we got one down, more of a cover 3 scheme or a cover 0 scheme where we love to go man. You know, you look at UAB, they played a lot of off coverage, a lot. They never got up in the face and pressed against Central Arkansas. So if I'm Miami, it's like, why are we playing off? Do you not trust your players? Do you just think that they're that bad that you can play off and still be able to come and rally to the ball? So when I'm watching a game and I'm scouting, a lot of that stuff comes into play. I love to watch a lot of the in-conference games because it's, you know, best of best. But that's actually a really good question as to what I'm looking at. But if I go deep into O-line or D-line, I'm looking at, you know, who do they like to double team? Where do they put their strength? Because some teams are a little weird, Mark. The tight call isn't always where the strength of the offense is. So they could be tight left, but you got a 3-by-1, which means there's a tight to this side, but the 3 wide receivers is on that side. So it's really strong right, tight left. Some teams go wherever that tight is, that's our strength. So we're going to have our defense shift that way. So there's just little things you're able to notice as you're watching it. And when you know what to look for, you know, it's kind of like a great director watching a movie. You know, they can tell where the cut is, where the lighting is, why they went that way. Oh, it could have been much better if they did it from this angle. If they had this type of light, if they zoomed in a little bit more, or if they zoomed out and the sun was rising above, you know, that type of stuff you're able to really look at. And sometimes, like I say, I get a lot of the overanalyzed Mark, but at the same time, that's what I'm going to be doing for the next 40 years. So why not, huh?
And I've got to think that the secondary in particular is difficult to analyze on the TV game because the quarterback drops back to pass, the camera goes with the ball. You're looking at the offensive line and defensive line struggle at the line. You're looking at the quarterback, but we don't know what kind of separation the wide receivers have downfield. We don't know if the quarterback made a bad decision because this dude was wide open over here and he threw it over here. So you get the limited view on television, although in the last, I'd say 5 years, they're showing us more of that elevated view with the sky cam from behind the quarterback in the center downfield and give us that look more often than they used to.
Right.
So you need to give us
and that's
that
called
thought.
rear. That's rear view. Rear view is QB view or linebacker view. Rear and sideline. Those are your two terms, rear and sideline view.
And I also have to think that it's the most difficult evaluation for you to make from game 1 going into game 2, because you've only seen the one game against the one opponent and a lot of adjustments are going to be made versus if it's week 8 and this corner you've seen for 7 games continues to bite on the double move, or this tackle continues to whiff on the inside swim move. It's probably not going to change at this point. They've been doing it for 8 weeks. It's probably not going to change. And you've really got a lock on the personnel and what they do well and what they don't do well.
Exactly. And then, you know, like I said, scouting against them, I mean, UAB is going to self-scout too. And then what do they have to scout for Miami? Oh, well, you're going to go to the Instagram and look at a couple of the highlights? Because there are QCs that do that, just to let people know. Are you going to have people that listen to the interviews to hear what type of scheme they're going to run? Yes, there are coaches that do that too. But at the same time, what they're going to do is go look at Coach Rick Lashley at his other stops. They're going to go look at Rob Likens at his other stops and how his wide receivers released, how his wide receivers played the ball. They're going to look at, you know, Miami last year at tight end. How did they use him? You know, the offensive line coach now, Coach Garrett Justice, was at like a D3, so maybe a little harder to find film on him and how he scouts his players. So you kind of really look at the QB, you know, the wide receivers, coaches, and running backs, things of that nature, and they're going to go off of last year's film. And one of the other things is when you have a lot of returning starters, there's a lot of film on said players. So you're able to go back and see how they do, you know, really well or bad. And that's one of the things that was talked about with our senior linebackers last year versus Florida. Well, there was 3 whole years worth of film on both those inside linebackers, and that's why they got atrociously destroyed versus Florida. You know, they played horrible. And one of the main things that, you know, one of those coaches said was we had a lot of film on those guys, so we knew how to attack them. So we're going to see.
Wholesome One, I know that you feel good, as I do as well, when people encourage you with the support, the inspiration to say, hey, love the content, love what you're doing, keep it up. It's a bright spot in my day. But especially, it's even more meaningful when somebody says, you know, I'm going through some rough times. This is a bright spot. I got to deal with a lot of things in my life, but man, when I flip on your video, it kind of takes me away from that. I'm able to put a smile on my face. We got a comment here from LeBrent. Mark, Wholesome One, during unprecedented times in our lives, we've seen a lot of depression and despair. Thank you for your constant love of sports to help us.
Appreciate it, man.
Appreciate that. Absolutely.
Thank you.